Fear only exists in the future. It's your mind preparing for what might or might not happen. So you can't be afraid of what's happening in the present moment, but you can already experience the negative side effects of feeling fear. And while fear can be a useful mechanism, the consequences of living in fear can often be worse than what we originally were afraid of. Welcome to Unwritten Tomes, where I talk about how fictional stories can relate to our everyday lives. Today's episode was inspired by an African folktale about a cowardly man named Igal Shidal. The Somali people actually have a bunch of stories and anecdotes about this Igal, but the one I came across and the one that made me think about the topic of this video was Igal Shidal and the enemy. So first of all, a quick summary of the story. At the beginning of the story, Igal's wife runs into their house and says that news are spreading about the enemy attack. They are attacking the village soon, and she wants him to help the other men defend the people. And first of all, the first reaction is Igal sort of refusing to accept reality, and that's also like a known mechanism of a coward. You refuse to accept what's actually happening. And he says that, don't joke about things like that, that's one of your worst jokes or something like that. But then she's like, no, wait, they are actually attacking. So then he believes her and he starts to freak out. Like, what is he going to do? How is he going to escape it? He has to hide or run. So he tells his wife to roll him into a rug. So he lies down and she rolls him into a rug, because that's his plan to hide from his enemies, that she should pretend that he already died and all that stuff. So when the enemy defeated the other warriors, then they enter this house and they see Igal's wife crying over the rug, and they ask her, how long has he been already dead? And then Igal from the inside of the rug says that, tell them it was already 2 days ago. And obviously it's a bit comedic, but obviously the enemy notices he is not actually dead since he is speaking. And they laugh at him, they mock him, and they say something like, there is no need to kill him, this cowardly man is already dead. So that's the entire story, it's just a short anecdote. But when analyzing it and sort of looking for different themes, obviously, fear, cowardice are the main topic. There are also a couple of different points that I started thinking about, and here is a couple of them. Number one, fear only exists in the future, as in you can only be afraid of what's going to happen or what is about to happen. It always coincides with uncertainty, and you might oppose it with an argument of something like, what if there is someone standing right now, right in front of me with a knife? Then still you're not really afraid for the present moment, you're afraid for what's about to happen in a second or two. The present reality is already defined, so there's sort of nothing to be afraid of. Fear always exists when there is uncertainty. Point number two, fear is obviously a useful survival mechanism. It helps us to avoid danger, but there is an important point to mention, that we evolved to be, oversensitive to fear. So evolutionary speaking, a false positive sign of danger was a less punishing scenario than a false negative. And to simplify it, pretty much, if I was afraid that there was some danger nearby, let's say a tiger, if I was afraid that there is a tiger in the bushes and there's actually no tiger, then I don't really lose that much. But if I am not afraid and there ends up being a tiger in the bushes, then I'm dead. So that's why we are quite oversensitive to fear. But in the modern world, most of the stuff we face on the daily basis are not that dangerous. Your chances of survival right now compared to how we used to live a couple of thousands years ago are much, much higher. In your daily life, you pretty much never risk your life. This oversensitivity to fear can make life much more difficult, especially since evolution maximizes survival and not your happiness. Evolution doesn't care about how you feel, it only cares that you pass on your genes to the next generation. And my final point, which is a bit more philosophical, is that if you're living in constant fear, then you're not really living. And that's based on the ending of the story this episode is about, when the Igal Shidal's enemy called him an already dead man. Because the argument is that when you're living in fear and you abandon your own goals, your values, your family, your responsibility, then there is nothing to live for. And while you can argue that maybe he made the right choice, he survived in the end, but what was the broader point of this survival, and what was the meaning of all of it? Maybe if he actually helped defend the village, then they would have defended it. And right now, what's left for him is to sort of be branded a coward. He will have no respect, he will have no meaningful life, and he will have to sort of carry that weight of being a coward, of abandoning his friends and his village for the rest of his life. And while in the story there is some space to argue whether his choice was right or not, because there was an actual threat to his life, then comparing it to our everyday lives, this argument doesn't apply anymore. In life, what we are usually afraid of is simply some discomfort. And when you really start thinking about it, how much you are restricted by that fear and how much it holds you back, then the consequences don't, logically speaking, seem that bad. That's also why I mentioned the point that we are evolutionary oversensitive to fear. Fear can cause you to avoid living the life you actually want to live. You'll miss out on opportunities, you'll miss out on interesting events just because you were afraid of facing some discomfort, like people laughing at you or something being a bit difficult to do, or that you're going to be tired and you don't really want to do it, or you don't know what you will say. Maybe you will avoid a conversation with someone interesting or with a potential partner, and it could have brought you to a completely different road of life, but you didn't do it because you were afraid of facing some discomfort. So when you compare the potential value added of doing a lot of things you avoid doing because of fear, then the consequences don't seem to hold the same weight. And even worse, the discomfort is not guaranteed. It's a potential discomfort. I mentioned that fear is always connected to uncertainty because the consequences are uncertain. So in our lives, we mostly make ourselves suffer over uncertain discomfort. Since being constantly afraid is not really a nice feeling, and what you're really afraid of is uncertain discomfort, then I guess we're pretty stupid. You know how people freak out in the airport, or that they might be late for a train, or like, how is this person going to respond if I go up and talk to them? Oh my god, if I post this video or start trying this new sport in public, or if I join a dance group, what are the people going to think? Are you really going to avoid living your life and pass on the only chance you have to do those things just because of some potential uncertain discomfort? Come on, man. Not only is all of that discomfort uncertain, the act of fearing those uncertain consequences is often worse than actually experiencing them. Fear makes you focus on the negatives and it makes you ignore the potential positive benefits of actions. Imagine how different your life could have looked if you were never afraid and if you were ready to face some risk. Risk going up to people, risk trying new things, risk losing a little bit of money, as long as it's not a meaningful amount you need to live. But you can risk a bit of money to try and start a new business. There are tons of things that have a almost infinite potential upside, but often just a very limited, uncertain consequences, which is usually just discomfort or losing a bit of time or getting tired, and just simple things that are not really comparable to how much you can potentially gain. Now, this is not a type of channel where I go into, here is a 5-step solution to solve all your fear and start living your life to the fullest. No, I believe understanding is already the solution. And all I do is just read some stories and share a couple of thoughts that I hope can be interesting. And I hope maybe I can also inspire people to start reading more stories again and reading more books. But I'm not a psychologist. And if those short reflections from the story are going to help you, then that would be great. If not, then I hope you at least enjoyed my rambling. And if you would be interested in moving towards a more written media, more books, or at least written word, then you might want to join my newsletter. It's kind of my personal mission to bring people away from social media, to inspire them to read more stories, read more books, and think about them and reflect on the contents. So if you enjoy fictional stories with some philosophical flavor, I'm launching the newsletter soon. The link is in the description, and as a bonus, every issue will contain a hand-drawn illustration, just because human-made artwork is still pretty cool in the age of AI. That's all from me. Thanks, guys.